All right, Joshua chapter 10. Let's begin here just noticing verses 1 and 2. Joshua 10, 1 and 2. Who will grab that for us? Elijah.
Now it came to pass when Adonizedek, king of Jerusalem, heard how Joshua had taken Ai and utterly destroyed it, as he had done to Jericho and its king, so he had done to Ai and its king, and how the inhabitants of Gibeon had made peace with Israel and were among them, that they feared greatly, because Gibeon was a great city, like one of the royal cities, and because it was greater than Ai, and all its men were mighty.
Okay, so it indicates here, it talks a little bit about what's in the background of what's happening, but what has happened previously in the book of Joshua kind of leading up to this point, just to summarize quickly here. So Joshua chapter 1 to chapter 9, what do we have going on? Nancy?
The children of Israel are starting to take the land, so they go in and take Jericho, which was a huge event. And then they became very overconfident and decided they'd go on and take Ai without consulting the Lord. So they lost, what was it,
36. Mm-hmm.
And that kind of shook them up because it just made them realize we can't do this ourselves. And so then they went up with God's help and they took Ai and they took the king and made an example of him, which spread throughout the area what they did to the king. So it kind of impressed me with this because every king is thinking, don't do that to me.
Okay.
So they definitely want to do something to protect themselves. It's not just their nation, but they know what's going to happen to them if Israel comes in.
Right, right. And so you have Israel going into the land of Canaan, crossing over Jordan, taking Jericho first, and after the missteps and things, they take the city of Ai or Ai there, and they're beginning to fulfill this long-awaited promise that God had made to Abraham all the way back in Genesis chapter 12, where he said he would give him a land. And of course, Abraham lived in the land of Canaan, but he never owned or he never possessed or received any of that promise. Now, he purchased a plot of land, but it's made very clear in the Bible that he wasn't the one who was going to receive that promise. Isaac and Jacob dwelt with him there, and eventually Jacob, of course, his sons go down to Egypt. They come out, they wander in the desert, and now this is the unfolding of it. What's interesting to me is we're going to see in a contrast here is the first 10 chapters are very detailed in the things that they're doing. When you go forward from 10, really 11, 12, on to 21, it just sort of goes quickly. There's not a lot of detail in the battles that they fight and things like that. And that's just showing us, it's establishing at the front, here's the nature of the things they were doing, what they were experiencing, how they were taking the land. And so there's a lot of lessons in here that we can draw from it. Something Nancy touched on in question number 3 was what motivated the alliance of these kings together. It talks about this Adonizedek, king of Jerusalem. He sees what's going on, and what's his response to that? To Jericho and Ai falling. Let me ask you this. What was the response of the United States, Australia, Great Britain, India, China, Russia, to Hitler? They made it. Why? What were they called? What were they called in World War II? The Allies, right? They were referred to the Allies versus the Axis, right? Here you have the king of Jerusalem going to these other men, to these other kings, and saying, we got to do something about this. We need to join together. We talked about, I think it was last week, how that you have these men who maybe they get along sometimes, maybe they don't, but they're kind of independent. They're doing their own thing. But now they see here's a common enemy, and we need to join together against this common enemy. And that happens today when people try to stand for what's right. People who normally may not agree with each other, who have different ways of doing things, that they'll join together against the person who's standing up for what is right. And so here you have that response of them pulling together to try to thwart Israel. Now, what's the other thing that's caused them concern? We didn't, it touched on it. Verse 2, it's not just that Israel's gone in and taken 2 cities so far, but what just happened that really raised a red flag for them, Mike?
We've got a mighty city of Gibeon that has now capitulated and said, we'll just give you everything that you want, just allow us to live here.
Yeah, anybody want to add to that? Remember, chapter 9 was all about Gibeon, the men coming and deceiving the children of Israel, saying they had been on this long journey and we want to make a treaty with you. Israel didn't consult the Lord. Back in 9:14, it says they didn't consult the Lord about it, so they gave in to that deception. They made this treaty that they weren't supposed to make, but they stuck to it, and we see going through this chapter how God backed them up in that treaty that they made, because Gibeon essentially said, we're not going to resist you coming to this land. If you recall in chapter 9, they said, because the Lord, we understand, has given it to you. And so we're not going to fight you. We'll be in alliance with you. We'll be your servants. They said initially when Israel found out that they had been deceived, Joshua said, you're going to be our slaves. You're going to carry water. You're going to be woodcutters for us. And so there was a bit of a consequence in the deception of this. But they're essentially saying, we're going to be your vassals. And what that means is we'll be there for you and you be there for us. And of course, Israel was more powerful. And so they're in a position they need Israel's help as this unfolds. But these kings see, look, here's one city, the Gibeonites, and it talks about some surrounding cities that are joined in with them. They've given in. So what's the danger? What's that? Others see what Gibeon has done, and they say, we're going to do what they do, and we'll be a vassal to Israel. We'll make a treaty with them. And so Adonai-Zedek, these other kings, don't want to do that. We don't want to give up our cities. We don't want to give up our power. We don't want to give up our wealth. We don't want to die. So we're not going to have that. And what's the decision that they make? What does it go on to say in verse 4? Verse 5. Let's just read 4 and 5. Who's got that? Joshua 10, 4 and 5. Go ahead, Carter.
Come up to me and help me, and let us strike Gibeon, for it has made peace with Joshua and with the people of Israel. Then the 5 kings of the Amorites, the king of Jerusalem, the king of Hebron, the king of Jarmuth, the king of Lachish, and the king of Eglon, gathered their forces and went up with all their armies and camped against Gibeon and made war against it.
Okay, so they're going against Gibeon. Why are they going against Gibeon?
They're trying to teach a lesson to other cities around. Don't make peace with these people. You need to push them out.
Exactly. If you make peace with them, we're coming after you. So don't do that. That's the lesson they're trying to teach everybody else. Ron?
Stephen, I have a question for you. As we understand here, it's talking about how great of a city Gibeon was, and it refers to it as one of the royal cities.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean to us?
The way I understand that royal city is it's a magnificent city, wealth in there. There's a question whether or not they had a king. It doesn't mention a king. It talks about inhabitants later. I think it mentions something about the elders. of the Gibeonites sending a message to to Israel. So I'm not sure about a king, but I take it in the wealth, the grandeur of that city, like one of the royal cities, right? So this is a great city, and they noted it's greater than Jericho and Ai. Cruz, you have something?
Yeah, I'm just going to piggyback on that. I think the way I read it is Gibeon wasn't a weak city. Right? And contrary, they could have fought back. They chose not to. Right? They chose to submit to Israel's God, which is a testament of acknowledging, right, that hey, God is great, and therefore, instead of fighting, we go another pathway rather than be aggressive.
Right. Right. Nancy?
Yeah, a little bit of a backtrack on that. This is the fulfillment of what God told them back in Deuteronomy. In 28:10, he said, all the people will hear that you are under the name of the Lord, and they're going to fear you. And that's exactly what's happening as they go in here. It's not Israel itself, it's that Israel is led by Jehovah God. The name of the Lord is what is causing fear.
Yes, because they see what's happening. They have all this history. Remember, originally when the spies went in, they talked to Rahab, and it makes the account. We know that God brought you across that Red Sea. The Lord, Jehovah, the God of Israel brought you across. He helped you defeat those two kings on the east side of Jordan. He brought you across the Jordan. We've heard all these things. We know all these things. We're very concerned about that. And they go in, they take Jericho, they take Ai, and they really take them relatively easy. Both of those cities, even though they ran into a problem at Ai to begin with, they still take it pretty easy. And they are petrified of what's about to happen because they see the handwriting on the wall, so to speak. So the Gibeonites say, we capitulate. These others are recognizing we have absolutely zero chance one by one. They're just going to keep picking us off. So we need to get together as a group of allies and try to repel them and resist them and push them out. Of course, that's not going to work. As we're going to see here, they go, they attack Gibeon, make an example of them for others. In verse 6, Joshua 10, verse 6, it says, and the men of Gibeon sent to Joshua at the camp at Gilgal, saying, do not forsake your servants. Come up to us quickly, save us, and help us. For all the kings of the Amorites who dwell in the mountains have gathered together against us. So they send up the flare, so to speak. Hey, we need help. We're in trouble here. They obviously see we can't stand against this alliance that's come against us. We're weaker than them. So we need your help. Come and help us. So let's read verses 7 through 9. 7 through 9. Who will get that? Jim, go ahead.
So Joshua ascended from Gilgal, he and all the people of war with him, and all the mighty men of valor. And the Lord said to Joshua, do not fear them, for I have delivered them into your hand. Not a man of them shall stand before you. Joshua therefore came upon them suddenly, having marched all night from Gilgal.
Okay. So they respond to that call, right? They're honoring the alliance, the treaty that they made with Gibeon. And we're coming to the rescue. So there is a dispute as to where this Gilgal is. Some people believe there's two Gilgals. And so depending on where it is, would understand how that geography plays out. But to the point here, how long did it take them to get there? All night. What's this called in military terms? Jim? If you march all night, what's that called? You recall? Hank?
Forced road march.
Yeah.
Force your men to march all night. It's called forced road march.
Yeah, it's not a normal thing. This isn't a distance they would normally cover. And why is it that would be rarely used?
Because it tires your men to do a march like that and then you go into battle. You normally want a day or two to rest and recuperate.
Right. And you think about this, they don't want to do it in the daytime to have that forced march and then have to immediately engage in battle. And you sure don't want to do it at night, because not only is there the march, but they missed a night of sleep. And so this is helping us to understand the Israelites were not immune to the nature of humanity. They would have shown up having exercised themselves all night, being tired, lacking rest, all of that. And so what's about to unfold is to impress us, hey, even though they were in that condition, they were able to win this great battle against these 5 kings that have joined together. So just keep that in mind as we're looking at this. The Lord, of course, is with Israel. So let's read verses 10 to 14 here. Joshua 10, 10 to 14. Who's got that? Zach?
And the Lord threw them into a panic before Israel, who struck them with a great blow at Gibeon and chased them by the way of the ascent of Beth Horon, and struck them as far as Azekah and Makkedah. And as they fled before Israel, while they were going down the ascent of Beth Horon, the Lord threw down large stones from heaven on them as far as Azekah, and they died. There were more who died because of the hailstones than the sons of Israel killed with the sword. At that time Joshua spoke to the Lord in the day when the Lord gave the Amorites over to the sons of Israel, and he said in the sight of Israel, Sun, stand still at Gibeon, and moon in the valley of Ajalon. And the sun stood still, and the moon stopped, until the nation took vengeance on their enemies. Is this not written in the book of Jasher? The sun stopped in the midst of heaven and did not hurry to set for about a whole day. There has been no day like it before or since, when the Lord heeded the voice of a man, when the Lord fought for Israel.
All right. So the sun and the moon stood still. If you go and read commentaries about this, you're going to read a fair amount of blasphemy because they explain it away. What is this that's happening here? It's a great miracle. Nothing else. It is a miracle that occurred. And what is a miracle, Paul?
It's an event like no other.
Ron?
Well, it is an event, but it's an event contrary to nature, to that which would normally have occurred.
Okay, yeah, it's a suspension of natural law.
Yes.
Is what occurs, right? Resurrection of the dead is suspension of natural law. So here, this is suspension of natural law. We know that there are laws of physics that govern the universe, that govern the rotation of the planet, govern the rotation, the orbit of the moon, the sun, its movement in the heavens. And we now, in our modern times, know that our entire solar system is flying through the universe. It's not as though the sun is sitting still in one spot and we're just sitting here spinning around, but everything's moving, right? So you think about that, it all comes to a stop in one way or another. That's a suspension of natural law. And it's under the hand, the power of God, of course. So it says it didn't go down for about a whole day, and it's written in the book of Jasher. So verse 13, that book of Jasher, does anybody have a footnote what that is? Book of Jasher. It's the book of the upright. It's mentioned again over in 2 Samuel chapter 1. Is this a lost book of the Bible? Okay. No. There are no lost books of the Bible. Okay. This is just a book that's mentioned there. Sort of like Paul in Acts chapter 17, he quotes the poets or things like that. Look, the Bible mentions other writings, doesn't mean they belong in the Bible. The book of Jasher, this is just a record of history, and the people who originally received this account of Joshua knew of this book of Jasher, maybe had a copy of it, and say, hey, it's also mentioned over there. Mike?
Yeah,
Right. Exactly right. Exactly right. So it's just noting something there. Don't let that throw you off. So either in this account, which would have been amazing, and you understand why somebody else would have recorded these events, because it wasn't just the Israelites and it wasn't just those people there that this happened to. I mean, people who were living in Rome at the time, or in Italy, I guess I should say, because Rome hadn't come to be, but people who lived in different places, people who lived down in Africa, they all would have had this day where, wait a second, what's going on? Either the sun's not coming up, depending on where they lived on the planet, or the sun's not going down. Something amazing is happening here. And so this miracle occurred for what purpose?
I think that Joshua saw the advantage that he had, that God had given him, the opportunity God had given him to destroy some major cities, some alliance, and he asked God to intervene so that he could do what he could do in order to make sure the children of Israel, the trail was laid a little bit further to their mission.
Also, fear takes away, when I read it, fear takes away the ability to fight God's battles. And God specifically commanded Joshua not to fear his enemies. In addition to that, when I was reading it, God does his work, right? But he encourages and he draws us into working with him.
And we'll get to that in just a moment. Hold that thought right there, Hank.
And what we're not realizing, in that time period, it was a common thing for the battles to end at night. One, they didn't have night vision, so it would have been hard to tell who you're fighting. But they would take care of them, move them off the battlefield, and then resume the next morning. He didn't want that, so he asked God for, let this go on. And not that they couldn't have done it with God's help, but it was for that reason.
He saw that God's promise, these have been given to your hand. He sees it being fulfilled in front of him. And even though his army has marched the whole night, he wants time to stand still so that they can finish the job.
Okay. Have any of y'all been working on something? Not this, maybe. Maybe Hank and Jim have experienced this, but you've been working on something, it's getting night, and it's the nature of a thing, maybe something you're working on outside. Well, I wish I had a couple more hours, I could get this finished up. That's really all this is let the daylight keep going, because we're not done, and I want to get it done. Just give me more time to kill these soldiers, kill this enemy army, and let's get that done. So, to Cruz's point in question number 4, discuss God and man working together in this section and other applications, instances of such a thing in the Bible. So, what about this idea of God and man working together here?
Well, first there was a covenant, right? The Gibeonites, they entered into a covenant with the Israelites. That's no different than us entering into a covenant through the New Testament and acknowledging Jesus as our Savior, right? And going through the list of steps to entering into that covenant and establishing that relationship.
Yes. How about right here with them, God and man working together?
It took two. I mean, it was, God didn't do all the work.
Right. So what is happening here? As God stops the rotation of the heavens, as he suspends that, what does Israel have to do? What else is God doing? God's helping out in another way.
Yeah, the hailstones.
The hailstones. And those have to be mighty big hailstones. Okay, I've known of those like in West Texas, talking about like grapefruit size hailstones. That could kill a person easily. God intervenes to help them defeat the enemy with the hailstones there, as well as with suspending, the sun standing still. But Israel still had to chase them down and had to kill the ones that they could get to. It wasn't like they just sat there and God took care of all of it. And it wasn't like God just said, well, good luck with it. It's the two of them working together to accomplish the intended purpose that God has of his people taking this land, defeating these pagan idolaters, and cleansing that land of the sin, the iniquity that was in there. We can't ever forget that this overall, while it is a taking of a territory, this is not a political issue at hand. Today we have political issues at hand. Well, we want that territory, we want those resources, things like that. This is a religious campaign that they're on, going in and driving these pagan idolaters out. They're supposed to suppress that. It's supposed to be a land devoted to God and honoring God. So there's more to it than just simply taking land, but God's working with his people. This is his will as they're going in to take the land. Mike?
Well, I think every one of their battles has been this way. Even with Jericho, they had something they had to do. They didn't have to do much except just follow God and do what he said. That is, march around the city. And then God took care of the rest. Whenever they went to Ai, they should have prayed to God first about going up there, but they didn't. They just went on without him. And there was a penalty to pay for that. When they started working with God, it started to happen again. So I think the lessons are being learned here for Joshua and the people. We've got to work with God, not run ahead of him.
Right. Very good. Any other thoughts there?
It's the idea of if you're not working with God, you're working against him. And as Mike just said, that's exactly what happened.
Right.
There's not a neutral, well, I'm not working with God, or I'm not his enemy. No, there's only two options. You're a friend or you're an enemy.
Ron?
In addition to your question about this, we certainly have a record of that. One, to me, that is the most notable and significant is the gifts that were given on the day of Pentecost on when the Holy Spirit came upon, particularly the apostles. And they were administrators of the Word of God, and they had confirmation of that through God working through them with miraculous gifts until that period of time was completed. And we have the written word. And then Paul in Ephesians chapter 3, verse 14, his prayer is that God would work with us through his providence and through the word. And so there's a continuation of that God's word is not void, and neither are we, because of his providence and his promise. And that's what, as we're studying here, the fulfillment of God's promise to his children.
Right. Yeah, a good example on that second part. Other instances in the Bible, when the Lord gave the command to the apostles to go into all the world, preach the gospel to every creature, he didn't just leave it up to those men to be able to advance the gospel, but he sent the Holy Spirit, endowed them with miraculous gifts. He revealed truth to them. Remember, Jesus said in John 14:26, he'll bring to your remembrance all things that I've said to you. John 16:13 revealed to you all truth. And so they had to be given that information. And then for people to be able to believe that, the miracles are there to confirm the word that was being taught. They weren't just a group of Jewish guys who decided, well, we've got our own little cult here around this carpenter from Nazareth. No, this is God. This is the hand of God. This is the work of God, the will of God. And so God did his part, and those men did their part in traveling and facing dangers and persecutions and things like that. And so God and man working together to get the gospel out into the world. Mike?
Yeah, another story that we have of the children of Israel is whenever the spies came back, and they wanted to kill the two who said we need to go down and take the land. And then God said, then you're not going to take the land. That's just the way it is. Well, the very next story is them standing out there on the ridge going, here we are, even though we have sinned, we're still going to go down and take the land. And they were repulsed behind
Mhm.
they're not working with God, they're working against God.
Yeah, they were. They were. Nancy.
Well, this is not an account back in the Old Testament, but Paul said we are fellow workers with God, very specific. And that whole context talks about God's role, our role, how they work together. And in the end, he does his part, we do our part, and he gets the increase. So he's very specific about the synergistic relationship we have with God.
Exactly right. And one of the more obvious ones in the New Testament is just saving the souls of man. God did his part, sending his son to die on the cross, shed his blood, the sacrifice for our sins. And now we have to do our part, respond to that gospel call, to submit to the will, to the commandments of God, to do his will. Otherwise, we stand in rebellion against him. We're not working with God. We don't receive the blessing. Here, the Israelites are working with God. God's doing his part. They're doing theirs. And they have great success in this battle. Any other thoughts before we press on? All right, Joshua 10, in verses 16 and following, really what we have here is more details about the battle that took place. It's not telling us about a second battle or anything like that. It's just giving more details about this campaign to wipe out these 5 kings here. So, first of all, Joshua 10, verses 16 to 21. Let's read that. Who will get it? Ron.
But these 5 kings had fled and hid themselves in a cave at Makkedah, and it was told to Joshua, saying, the 5 kings have fled. The 5 kings have been found hidden in the cave of Makkedah. So Joshua said, roll large stones against the mouth of the cave, and set men by it to guard them. And do not stay there yourselves, but pursue your enemies and attack their rear guard. Do not allow them to enter their cities, for the Lord your God has delivered them into your hand. Then it happened, while Joshua and the children of Israel made an end of slaying them with a very great slaughter, till they had finished, that those who escaped entered fortified cities. And all the people returned to the camp, to Joshua at Makkedah, in peace. No one moved his tongue against any of the children of Israel.
Okay. So that idea of no one moving the tongue against the children of Israel, no one's able to resist them. That God is with them. They are giving complete victory as they're working to wipe these people out. But something else there. In verse 20, Israel made an end of slaying them with a very great slaughter. What does that bring to mind for you when you think of slaying and very great slaughter?
I always think, it's just kind of a one-sided deal. It's not
Okay.
not even close. They just kill them at will.
Anybody do reading about ancient battles? Ancient battles where they have swords and spears and stuff. They were extremely gory. In our modern time, you have a firearm, and sometimes a firearm can do a lot of damage. It can be grotesque, with what happens with the human body when a piece of lead hits it. But nothing like back then. Because a guy might get cut 4 or 5 times with a sword, but he's not dead. But there are cuts, where their insides come out. Or, there's some accounts of them sticking swords through their mouth. It comes out the back of their head. And I'm sorry to be that way, but that's the nature of warfare. That's what they're doing. The children of Israel have swords, they have spears, and they are hacking people. What does that tell you about the nature of that warfare? Do you think that's difficult? First of all, do you think that would be difficult? It would not be a pleasant work. You already think about work you do during the day. You're outside, you're it talks about they're kind of in a mountainous area. It's going to be rigorous work. It's going to be physically toiling. It's going to be dirty. But then you add on top of that the blood and the guts and everything that's coming with this. That's what they're doing. And to make a point, when we are serving God and fulfilling His will and we're advancing His cause, we come up against enemies. And we have to slay those enemies. We're not talking about physical warfare, but we're talking about spiritually. We're talking about reasoning and rationalizing. And, there's a reason in the New Testament that the Bible is called the sword of the Spirit. Because there's hacking that has to be done. There's a battle. It's not pleasant when you have to do those things. And you get tired, you get dirty, if you will. It's an arduous type of thing, but it's something that has to be done. It's a part of advancing the gospel. Because there are people who are enemies of the cross of Christ, and you have to confront those, and you have to fight them, and you fight them to the death. You don't fight them to a stalemate. You don't say, well, you know what? I'm happy for you to believe that. I'm happy for me to believe this. And no, that's sin, that's error, that's wrong. We can't give in on those things. We have to continue to advance that cause. The children of Israel here are continuing to advance it, even though it's a very great slaughter and a difficult thing to do. Ron?
And I was thinking, Stephen, in regards to this, and as you mentioned in historical records, an injury almost certainly resulted in death. And as we know in the account of the Civil War in the United States, it is reported that more men died, not on the battlefield, but as a result of the injuries, because you cannot be treated for it. So
Yeah.
is the case here.
Yeah, they might bleed out, or because they've been pierced in an organ, it fails, but they survive for a few days, or they get infections and things like that.
The enemy sometimes is the one within, it's ourselves, and perhaps that's the connection to the cut your hand off if it causes you to stumble. And I'm not 100% sure if there's any, literal sense in that. I tend to think not, but if your hand causes you to sin, the gory thing to do is to remove it, the sin from your life. So yes, the external enemy, but not to fool ourselves that we're never that cause. Well, we are. We are the enemy of God.
Yeah, when we turn against Him, we refuse to live by His will, we become an enemy, as James says. Friendship with the world is enmity with God.
Well, when you said, what does that make you think of? They killed them with a very great slaughter. What that makes me think of is God's attitude towards those who resist Him, who will not accept Him. He said, you're going to go in there and destroy all those nations because they were idolatrous and ungodly people.
Mm-hmm.
So, when you hear words like that, this is at God's it's God's attitude
Yes.
toward rebellion.
Yes, toward that rebellion, toward that sin, toward the idolatry, the iniquity that was in the land. Let's read verses 22 to 27 and see how this kind of wraps up here. 22 to 27, who's got that for us? Elijah.
Then Joshua said, open the mouth of the cave and bring out those 5 kings to me from the cave. And they did so and brought out those 5 kings to him from the cave. The king of Jerusalem, the king of Gibeon, the king of Jarmuth, the king of Lachish, and the king of Eglon. So it was when they brought out those kings to Joshua, that Joshua called for all the men of Israel and said to the captains of the men of war who went with him, come near, put your feet on the necks of these kings. And they drew near and put their feet on their necks. Then Joshua said to them, do not be afraid nor be dismayed. Be strong and of good courage, for thus the Lord will do to all your enemies against whom you fight. And afterward Joshua struck them and killed them, and hanged them on 5 trees. And they were hanging on the trees until evening. So it was at the time of the going down of the sun that Joshua commanded, and they took them down from the trees, cast them into the cave where they had been hidden, and laid large stones against the cave's mouth, which remain until this very day.
All right. What's going on here? What's this whole thing with bring them out, Come here, put your feet on them.
Pagan kings deserve death and destruction and destruction.
They do that.
It's common in that time to keep the kings alive and make them subject to standing only that one. But that wasn't God's intent, and He wanted His men to do it. It was uncommon for the men to treat a king like that, subject to common.
Yeah. One thing, they're executing them instead of keeping them and using them as a political pawn under their control or whatnot there. So, yeah, that's one thing. What about this idea of the feet on the necks? What's happening here? Cruz?
The men who fought were, in a sense, the way I interpret it is, feeling that sense of victory, and, through the help of God, right? They put in the work, right? They were able to conquer kings, right? Something that, a Confederate army of kings. So it was a way of them to actually feel that sense of victory.
Okay. Ron?
Display of supremacy, and as we would say in current days, a show of force, that who is dominant. And as we know, this is representing God, because God is the one that has led the battle.
Yeah.
In a sense.
There in verse 24, when Joshua called the men of Israel and the captains, he says, put your feet on their necks. Verse 25, what does he tell them? Don't be afraid, don't be dismayed, be strong and of good courage. Exactly what he was told back in chapter 1, what the men encouraged him for, he's now encouraging them. Basically what he's saying is, look at what we are able to do as we are following God, as we're going into this land. Remember, again, this is relatively early on in the invasion and the conquering of Canaan. Remember, they had gotten Jericho, they had gotten Ai, and now there's this huge alliance of kings that have come against them, and they're able to handily defeat them. And come here, guys, that encouragement that Cruz was talking about. Come here, put your foot on them. That's what we're going to do the rest of the way. What a morale booster that would be for them to be able to do that. And so they execute them, they hang them on a tree. It's the idea they really impale them on a tree. Then they take their bodies down, of course. But it's just saying, look at the power, the victory that we have. A great lesson for us. What does the New Testament teach us about Christ when he came out of the grave?
He was victorious.
Victorious. Colossians talks about how he triumphed over them in it. He triumphed over his enemies through the cross. Satan thought that's it. His enemies thought that's it. No, he came out of the grave. He is a victorious king. He's sitting and ruling and reigning on the throne of David now at the right hand of God. And 1 Corinthians 15 says the last enemy that will be defeated is death. And that's a foregone conclusion. Well, are we on his side? Because that's going to be the victorious side. It should encourage us. It should motivate us. Let's notice real quick. I want to notice one passage, Romans 16. Romans 16. I know there's a couple of hands popping up, but I want to tie this point together, and then we'll have a couple of minutes to catch a couple more things. So Romans 16. Let's read verses 17 down through 20, please. 17 to 20. Who's got this? Romans. Go ahead, Charles.
Now, your brethren, note those who cause division and offenses contrary to the doctrine which you have learned, and avoid them. For those who are such do not serve our Lord Jesus Christ, but their own belly, and by smooth words and flattering speech deceive the heart of the simple. For your obedience has become known to all. Therefore I am glad on your behalf, but I want you to be wise in what is good, and simple concerning evil. And the God of peace will crush Satan under your feet shortly. The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ be with you. Amen.
All right, so he acknowledges, look, there's people out there that are teaching things contrary. They need to be marked. You need to know about that. So there's conflict going on, if you will. And you are obedient to the Lord. Verse 20, the God of peace will crush Satan under your feet. Do you know we can crush Satan under our feet? He's a powerful enemy. There's no question about that. And on our own, he'll have his way with us. But with the Lord, we can crush him under our feet. That ought to encourage us as we think about going out and fighting that daily battle to live for the Lord. Now, a few hands. Mike.
You know, as I said, whenever Jesus was talking about his church to Peter, and he said the gates of hell will never not be able to prevail against it. A lot of times we see the church is barely hanging on, but the promise is not even the gates of hell are going to prevail against us.
Any other thoughts? Zach.
2 Psalms, Psalm 8, 4 through 6, and Psalm 110, verse 1. Everything is in subjection under Christ's feet, and the enemies are put under his feet. So
Yes.
the imagery in Joshua 10 is not the only instance. It's really the building block. Well, actually, the prophecy in Genesis 3.
Yes.
So it's all been there from the beginning. This is all meant to happen. The imagery is being threaded through cover to cover.
Yes, exactly right. That's one of the great beauties of the Bible, Ron.
The very concern that the kings had was realized, as we noted in the outset of our study. And the other part about this, just like with the Apostle Paul, why do you resist? Why would we want to resist the mighty hand of God?
Okay, so we'll close with this. They made this treaty with the Gibeonites, which they weren't supposed to do, but look at what came out of this. It pulled these kings together, these 5 ones that the Israelites would have had to go to the various cities, but now they're pulled into one, and they're crushed in one decisive, campaign or war here. And that's just a wonderful thing. Yeah, to me, I wonder, it doesn't specifically say it, but I wonder if that's why God allowed it to happen, because the Gibeonites not only capitulated, accepted God's will in the situation, but also look at what it gave rise to. Just, boom, wiped them all out. All right, Lord willing, we'll press on and go ahead and do that next lesson as well, please, through chapter 21. Thank you all.